Hello. Today what we're going to talk about is the intersection of sex, politics, and violence. I think most people are probably familiar with the idea that violence and politics go together. But for our author today, the nexus of our political struggles also includes sex. I'm Mark, and this is Several Books. The author we're looking at today is Elfriede Jelinek. Elfriede Jelinek is an Austrian writer. She's often considered somewhat of a feminist. What I want to do is to position Elfriede Jelinek as the rightful heir to Samuel Beckett's tradition. Her novels are self-referential, and her plays include numerous voices. She won the Nobel Prize for her polyphony of voices, and it's that self-referentiality that makes her so much fun. What we're going to do is start with her novels, and then we will work into the collection of 3 plays that I have. Her first novel is her most famous. The first novel of Elfriede Jelinek is The Piano Teacher. The novel is known, especially abroad, for being a great film by Michael Haneke. I would say that the film is a very faithful rendition to the novel. There are certain aspects of the novel that are impossible to create in the film, such as the way that Jelinek comments on the text as she's writing it, and there are certain flights of fancy that don't translate into film. That said, aside from that, the characters in the film are older. In Jelinek's novel, the characters are teenager and young woman, probably around 30, I think, 38. In the movie, the young man is in his, I believe, late 20s, and the woman, Isabel Huppert, is probably around 50 or so. The novel is great. I don't have a huge amount to say about the novel, aside from that it's a very successful novel. What we see essentially is that a woman is haunted by the crimes of Austria and the political movements of Austria, and she essentially tries to live her life in a world of totalitarianism. She lives with her mother, and her mother is this overbearing figure. The woman lashes out by, for instance, going to porn shops and seeing peep shows and things like that. Aside from that, what I would say is that the style of the book, as I said, is self-referential, and this is what makes me think of Samuel Beckett. It's as if a voice is relating a story, and then it will comment on the events that it just narrated. So the overall novel experience is often one of amusement. It's very fun to read. What I'm going to do is say that this is an S-tier novel, and I encourage everybody to look at it. It's a great book. The next book we're going to look at is Women as Lovers. Women as Lovers. And Jelinek wrote 3 novels that are fairly short, which are what we're going to look at, and then we'll go into her longer later novels. But Women as Lovers is a very enjoyable book, but it's a bit shocking. Her 3 shorter novels tend to be very abrupt, and kind of in your face. Women as Lovers is the story of two women. One woman is very conniving, and the other woman is simply living her life and going about her day-to-day and enjoying herself. The woman who's very conniving essentially plans to marry a man who she believes can provide her with a good foundation and economic status. And she plans very pointedly to marry this man and kind of engineers her relationship with him. The other woman kind of lives for love, and she's going through her day-to-day happy-go-lucky and so forth. The woman who is going through her day-to-day kind of falls in love and lives what I would think of as a more conventional relationship. The ultimate issue with the novel, the main problem, is that the woman who marries for love winds up in a very abysmal situation financially. The woman who marries a man who she believes can help her financially is shown as the woman who makes the good decision. Now, it's important to say that this is not what Jelinek is saying is good. She's not saying don't marry for love, at least not necessarily. The purpose of the novel appears to be the problem that there is a society that she's living in where the woman who is conniving and marries a man solely to further herself financially is the woman who's making the good decisions in life. So the novel presents these two paths via two different characters, and Jelinek's intention appears to be to show that this is a very problematic situation. So Women and Lovers, I would probably give this either an A or an S tier to make sure that we're keeping things more balanced. What I'm going to say is Women and Lovers is an A tier. The next book that we're going to look at is Lust. And Lust is a very shocking novel. So as you can see, there's Lust. Lust is the story of a husband and wife who work, I believe it's at a ski resort or something like that. They're on a mountain. The book is pornographic the way a writer like Pierre Guyotat is pornographic. There is a great deal of description of sex in the novel, but the reason why she's writing the sex is to illustrate the violence of the sex and not to act as pornography as we think of it. There's not really a huge plot in Lust. It's mostly just this woman and her husband seems not to appreciate her. And there is a lot of wordplay in the book. So she's describing different sexual things in a very amusing fashion. Eventually there is an affair, but again, the woman winds up with her husband. I thought the book was great. I don't have a lot to say about it. I worry that me telling you that the book was great is like me recommending somebody read Crash by J.G. Ballard, or really Guyotat, who I've talked about a few times. There's some pretty disturbing stuff in the book. The book is definitely a work of feminism, but when I say that it's a work of feminism, that makes it sound like there's a misconception around online discussion of feminism, that feminism is a bad thing, or, there's all this political baggage with it. I would say this is a work like a Kathy Aker book. So it's very in your face and bold in its sexuality. And if anything, it's disturbing. So this is transgressive fiction without a doubt. I'm going to give this an S as well. So we've got The Piano Teacher and Lust are S, and Women as Lovers I'm going to give an A. The next book we're going to look at is Wonderful, Wonderful Times. And Wonderful, Wonderful Times is a slightly more conventional novel. As you can see, Wonderful, Wonderful Times. Wonderful, Wonderful Times is the story of 4 teenagers in post-war Austria. And the book is within reason pretty in your face. It's not really as upfront as a book like Lust is. Essentially, though, there's a scene that's like harkening back to Anthony Burgess' A Clockwork Orange, where the 4 teenagers beat up a person walking down the street. And that kind of sets off the whole novel. The whole novel is essentially these 4 teenagers living a very immoral life. There's a fair amount of sex in the book and some violence. The ending is particularly violent. In general, this is, in my opinion, probably the worst of her 3 short novels. So what we're going to do is rank this as a B. I think it's a very good book still. The wordplay makes the book, the self-referentiality. So again, when you read Jelinek, think of Samuel Beckett. She's this self-referential figure. Think of maybe a book like Malone Dies. And she's also a playwright. So that's kind of where I'd guide you to think of when reading Jelinek. But this book is a B. It's very good overall. It's not my favorite. Lots of violence, discussion of the teenagers. They like to talk about French literature, and it's fitting that the characters are interested in Georges Bataille and the Marquis de Sade. This is in that tradition, this kind of provocative, transgressive, often very sexual fiction. So this is a B. The next book that we're going to look at is Children of the Dead. This is Children of the Dead. As you can see, this is a much larger book than her other books. My honest opinion is that this is not her best book. I don't actually remember it very well. The book really reads like a long prose poem. It's often called a postmodern horror novel, which would typically interest me a great deal. The issue is that there's no dialogue in the book. So you're getting reflections on Austria. I believe there are like ghosts living in the soil because of the crimes that occurred under the Nazis. But this is really for Jelinek, at least in English, her fans who are already there. I would not recommend this book to somebody who has never read Jelinek. I don't remember it very well. I read it going pretty quickly, and that's part of the problem I have with the book. Typically, I like books that stick with you for a while. Aside from some general images about Austrian forests and ghosts and things like that, there's just not a whole lot here to carry with you moving forward. What I'm going to do is rank this as a C+ book. It's a solid work for somebody who's read Jelinek, but it's just simply not really transferable. It's not an easy book to recommend to people. It's not as experimental as her other work. It's not a failure, but this is a book that I think if you speak Austrian, it's probably going to stick with you a little better. I am very certain that her poetic skills are more on display in this book. The last novel that we're going to read is Greed. Greed, as you can see, is has a nice little cover on it. The book reminds you of one of those jars of cookies, the shortbread cookies, and it's a pretty interesting book. So Greed. Now, Greed is a return for Jelinek back to the style of novel that she wrote with The Piano Teacher. I don't think it's as good as The Piano Teacher, but this is aggressively feminist, aggressively about people who are mistreating one another. There's essentially a country policeman who goes about having affairs, and he ultimately gets somebody pregnant, and the way that that's handled is the ending of the novel. I think the book is really good, but I don't remember it quite as well as The Piano Teacher. And when I talk about remembering books, for me, part of what makes a book good is that it sticks with you. I don't think I'll ever forget The Piano Teacher. The movie is one of my favorite movies, so that might be part of the reason why I would say that. But the book itself is distinct from the movie. It's the narration is significant. Greed, the narration is not quite as strong, but the book overall is a great novel. So I'm going to rate this, let's say, an A. Okay, so before we go on to the plays, let's look one more time at the novels. We've got Piano Teacher is a S. Women as Lovers is an A. Lust is an S. Wonderful, Wonderful Times is a B. Children of the Dead is a C+, and Greed is in A. The last book that we're going to look at is her plays. So I've only read the 3 plays in this book in English by Jelinek. If I'm going to be completely honest, I could probably reread these plays very slowly and make an entire half-an-hour video on the plays alone. The 3 plays are here, and the titles of the plays are Reichnitz, The Merchant's Contracts, which is a comedy of economics it's called, and Charges, or The Supplicants. I don't have a background in theater. I like theater a lot, but I've never been really involved in play performance or anything like that. The extent of my real theater watching is there's a collection of Samuel Beckett plays called Beckett on Film that I used to watch obsessively. I've seen all of those plays on the film numerous times. I watch plays on YouTube sometimes. I have. It's not a regular occurrence for me, but I have done that. A few Chekhov plays, Moliere, etc. I've definitely got more knowledge of plays than somebody who does not read theater ever. I've read the first folio, all of Moliere, a good bit of Beckett, Harold Pinter, Sarah Kane, writers like that. Now, I mention all of this because these plays are unique for plays that I've read. I'm going to link a site or a YouTube video talking about Poor Theater and Antonin Artaud. These are plays that are more in the tradition of this avant-garde theater than they are in the tradition of Shakespeare, for instance. So the interesting thing about these plays is that despite there literally being people on stage, there basically aren't characters. There are essentially no stage directions in her plays, and she doesn't even attribute dialogue in the play to specific characters. Reichnitz, there's essentially an unlimited stream. It's a huge number of messengers who go to a castle and relate information about European politics and war to one another. So these characters come up on stage, essentially deliver a very long monologue. You're talking between 2 and 5 pages, just delivering the monologue. I'm not sure how they do that in performance, if they'd read it off a page or if they had to memorize it. But you've got a large number of actors doing this. The second play, so in that sense, it's kind of like it's disembodied. There's no real character. You're not getting messengers who are having conversations really. The probably 95% of the play is just these monologues. So that's Reichnitz. The monologues are again about European politics mostly and war. The second play is The Merchant's Contracts. The Merchant's Contracts is the play opens with four men standing on stage. They're essentially working at like a financial tech firm type situation, but all of the equipment, the computers, the phones are on the floor, and there is a speech displayed on the back wall of the theater. And the four men essentially read this speech off by yelling it. They're not supposed to be reading it in unison. So you've got men speaking very, very loudly, going through all these complaints about the banking crash and the financial crisis of like 2008. By the end of the play, there is a chorus of old men who just shout stuff out. Lots of long speeches, and then there are literally angels who are talking about everything from the financial crisis to that in Death Valley there are rocks that move at night, and people aren't really too sure exactly what's happening there or why that occurs. The play is just in-your-face experimental. I thought it was interesting, but it's not my favorite play. In general, these aren't my favorite plays, but they're so in your face in what they're doing, and they're so outside the norm for plays that they need to be noted. The final play in the collection is called Charges or The Supplicants, and the play is it's a very long monologue. Now, I don't know to what degree Jelinek was involved in the play productions. I didn't read the introduction to the book. I just kind of read the plays. But I think that you might be able to perform that monologue as a group or let certain people highlight the reading. It's like an 80-page monologue. It would be a tremendous amount of text for a single person to memorize and then recite. The reason why, as I said, that these really kind of could be their own fully half-hour video is, as I said, they're so experimental, and I guess you call it the mise-en-scene, the way the plays are kind of presented, the atmosphere around the play, how people are involved, are unique. If you're curious about the plays, when I checked on Wikipedia, the plays were said to be in post-dramatic theater. I don't know exactly what that means, but I have linked those two videos about more avant-garde theater that I think would put you in the right mindset to read them. So, again, that's let's give her plays, let's give them an S, because it's kind of like, for me, reading schoolwork almost. And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is that it's like being introduced to an art form that I really wasn't totally familiar with beforehand. And it felt very curated and a positive experience overall. One last time to rate Jelinek, we're giving The Piano Teacher an S, Women as Lovers an A, Lust an S, Wonderful Wonderful Times a B, The Children of the Dead a C+, Greed we're going to give an A, and the three plays we're going to give an S. Jelinek did win the Nobel Prize in about 2004, and I definitely think she's worth reading, otherwise I wouldn't have made this. There's not a whole lot else for me to say at the moment. If people are curious, the videos that I'm thinking of making at the moment, I want to reread Virginie Despentes and make a video for her. I think she'll be very good for this channel because I don't think that she's hugely well known outside of France. And there are available translations of her work. I also need to reread a book or two of Toni Morrison, but after doing that I can make a video on Toni Morrison. Alright guys, if there's nothing else, I'll let you go. Thanks for listening to me here, and several books out. Bye-bye.